Hello and welcome to Mentora IAS. I am your friend and guide Safir, and today I'll be talking about how to tackle one of the most puzzling sections, one of the most extensive sections of your entire UPSC journey, that is current affairs. I really understand if you basically have a similar kind of thought in your mind when you talk about current affairs. Or at least this is the case with at least 95% of the aspirants who aspire to become a civil servant someday. Okay, that there is something called current affairs, and this basically covers everything under the sun. So what exactly are you supposed to read, from where are you supposed to read it, and till what extent are you supposed to read it? Okay, but if you stay with me in this particular video, I will definitely try to change your perspective about current affairs from something as mundane as this to something as useful and organized as this. Okay, where you are going to understand first of all why exactly current affairs are required, what exactly is the importance of current affairs, how do you prepare current affairs, and we'll also be seeing it via the various types of questions that have been asked in the UPSC, that how exactly the UPSC's approach towards current affairs has evolved over time. So let us begin this particular session with first of all addressing what exactly is current affairs all about. Okay, so when you talk about the concept of current affairs, so current affairs are a sum total of all the events, or rather public events, that are happening throughout the world and which are recorded and then reported by the various journalistic articles through newspapers, through media houses, or through blogs. Okay, now the point being, every particular newspaper, every particular journalist is basically having a particular kind of speciality of reporting things. So there are a lot of events that are happening throughout the world, but only few of them get reported in many of the journals. Why? First of all, they are not of immense public importance. Okay, and if they are of immense public importance, then what exactly is the reason behind this? So that is why when you talk about the current affairs portion, it is something which includes all the kind of events that you actually see with respect to social life. That could be related to economics and finances, that will be related to politics, that will be related to administration, that will be related to courts, it will be related to sports, entertainment. Okay, that is basically how you see current affairs going on. So when we talk about current affairs, how do we analyze what exactly is to be read with respect to UPSC? Now when we talk about UPSC, so UPSC Civil Services Examination, the word here is civil. So it basically deals with everything that impacts the civil or public at large. So any event that is going to have an implication on the public or having an impact on the public is something that you are going to be interested in with respect to civil services. Okay, so how and what to choose, that is something that we are going to learn in eventual slides. Okay, so let us first of all understand that particular part, what exactly is current affairs. So current affairs covers every single thing. Okay, it will talk about the concept of finance and economy, it will have technology and biotechnology. Okay, it is something which will also cover sports and entertainment, it will be having administration, politics and everything. Okay, and these events go on throughout the world 24/7, but we need not cover all of them together. Okay, now that is the perception which candidates usually have when we actually begin with current affairs, that first of all we do not know what is current affairs, second we do not know what to cover in current affairs, and that is why it becomes so mundane. Okay, so let us bit by bit understand how exactly to befriend this particular area. And believe me when I tell this, that this is going to be the foundation of your GS journey in the coming days. Okay, but only when you stay with me and you understand what exactly are these. First of all, let us understand why exactly are they important. Okay, if you become a civil servant or want to become a civil servant, it is very important for you to know what exactly are the current or recent developments that have happened overnight while you were sleeping, or for that matter while you were away from a particular place. Why does this help you? This helps you in two things. First of all, you are informed about the developments. So if you are informed about the developments, it basically tells you that how exactly are you going to react to it, or how exactly are you going to respond to it. Okay, the second thing, it actually adds on to your knowledge. Okay, it adds on to your vocabulary as well. So that is basically one of the most important reasons why you should be staying updated with current affairs. Okay, the next thing, when we talk about as an aspirant, why exactly is it important? So while we read any particular piece of information from our textbooks, and that could be from any subject. You may be talking about geography or rainfall, you may be talking about amendment to the Constitution of India, you may be talking about how we measure the distance between two celestial objects, okay, or for that matter inflation and its impacts. What happens is that what we read in the textbook, okay, we get to see in live reality when we read the newspapers, okay, but the point is that you need to read the newspapers. Then you are going to understand what you have read in the textbook and how exactly is it implemented in the real world, and that is exactly what UPSC wants from you. First of all, to know how to implement things, and second, what would be the novel ways of implementing it. Okay, so that is what we have to focus upon, the first part. Okay, so that is why we have to analyze those things, those events which are going to impact the public, country, or for that matter world at large. Okay, so we are not very concerned about the state that you are living in or the state you are coming from with respect to current affairs for UPSC Civil Services Examination. Here we are concerned about things at broader level, that is at the national level or the international level. Okay, so that is basically the importance of UPSC with respect to current affairs with respect to UPSC. Now in terms of questions, how exactly the questions have been asked in the Civil Services Examination in the preliminary page. So we basically see that if we are dividing the entire, you can say, UPSC syllabus into 5 major subjects. Okay, so that will be history, geography, so history, geography, polity, science and technology, environment and economy. Okay, so these 6 subjects are basically the ones where you actually talk about the various you can say the subjects that we are there that we are having with respect to the preliminary examination, where the questions are going to be asked from. If you divide, okay, these are the 6 subjects and there are 100 questions. Okay, 100 questions divided by 6 subjects. Okay, so that basically gives you a calculation of 16 questions per subject, and with 4 questions at hand, because 16 times 6 is 96, 4 questions remain, so 4 questions can be evenly distributed in any of these. So on an average, every single subject is getting about 16 to 18 questions. But the point is that not all of these questions are coming exclusively from that subject, which is supposedly also called static area. So static area with respect to prelims is something, or with respect to UPSC is something which actually is covered in books. These are basically the concepts and fundamentals that do not change. So they are covered in book. That is something which is informally called the static area. Okay, but not all the things that are basically taught with respect to the static area are the only points of questions here. You would be finding questions from all of these subjects from the current affairs. There will be certain questions which will be mixing both of them together, where you will be having current affairs as well as static portion mixed in a single question. So in that particular manner, we see that throughout the journey, okay, since 2012 till 2025, there has been a successive increase in the number of current affairs questions. Second, that we also see that current affairs question on an average are about 22 questions. Okay, for the past 6 years, between 2020 to 2025, there have been 6 different papers, and the average value that can be taken is comfortably anywhere between 23 to 24 questions. Now, with these 23 to 24 questions, what also happens is that not all the questions are going to be straight away current affairs, but at the same time, not all of them are going to be straight away static as well. Some of them are hybrid. Some of them are linked with the static part as well. So that is why when we talk about this entire concept, we have to understand that there will be parts of static as well as current affairs together. So you can expect that about 20 to 22, 25 questions within your prelims examination are going to be from the current affairs portion. Okay, and believe me when I tell you this, that current affairs, if done properly, are having some of the simplest questions to be answered, but only in the case of the point that you're doing it properly. Okay, if you are trying to have any kind of shortcuts here, okay, or if you are trying to read any of the notes here, just by reading the notes you are able to get the current affairs, so that is not going to certainly help you. It will definitely be an unsolvable terrain for you. But the point being, if you read it right, these are the most straightforward questions that come up. Okay, and I'll be telling you the logic in the coming slides as well. Okay, so that is basically the impact of current affairs. So in 2025, there were about 22 questions if we consider those questions where static part was also mixed with the current affairs part. With respect to pure current affairs, 15 questions. Okay, so even if you see that way, 15 questions translate to 30 marks in your examination and 22 translate to 44 marks in the examination. Okay, and if we talk about the cutoff trends in preliminary examination paper 1, so we see that the cutoff is not going somewhere near 100 nowadays. Okay, so this is basically a very significant portion of your question paper. Okay, 2024 you had 26 questions, and that basically includes those with mixed with static as well, and that is how this particular data is yielded. Okay, now when we talk about what exactly is the criteria for mains, so with respect to mains examination, there are two papers, okay, with respect to general studies, which are the most dreaded. Okay, why are they dreaded? Because those are some things which are also informally called dynamic paper. Okay, they are actually called dynamic paper. And what exactly dynamic paper means? That they basically have questions inspired from current affairs or questions based on current affairs. Okay, and these two you might be knowing them as well, but the point is that these two are actually paper 2 and paper 3. Okay, so paper 2 is basically the portion which covers polity, Constitution of India, governance. Okay, then you have international relations. This is basically dreaded as one of those papers. And then the third paper, which basically has got all the dynamic subjects like economy, environment, science and tech, disaster management, internal security. Now these are basically the subjects which have a lot of developments that go on throughout the world throughout the year. So that is why what is seen with respect to these two papers are that the students usually find it difficult to attempt these questions, and they basically say the reason is that we are not very good with current affairs. So it is of no value if you have a very good command over the static or the textbooks, but you do not have command over current affairs. Because what happens is that with respect to your paper 2, when you talk about the paper dealing with polity, international relations, governance, there sometimes you are also asked what exactly are the case laws related to a particular aspect. Okay, so that is why people fumble in these papers. But the point is that if this particular area is covered right, okay, this is not going to be as difficult as it seems to be. Okay, what they are going to ask is something which is very fundamental, but reading that fundamental requires you to read current affairs. Okay, and then subsequently with respect to current affairs, it significantly helps you in boosting the example values. Okay, you may be quoting examples, you may be quoting events from the current affairs with respect to your essay, with respect to your interview, also with respect to your papers. Okay, and that is something which actually is going to exhibit you as a well-rounded aspirant, and that is what is required. Okay, so unless you basically are going to befriend current affairs, this particular examination that actually gives you the rank and qualification for the civil services is going to be a very difficult you can say terrain for you. So that is why we need to do it in you can say a very holistic manner, and this is something which also needs to be done in step-by-step manner. You cannot be befriending current affairs after qualifying prelims. Okay, you need to do this from the very beginning, so that you have a very great bond with current affairs. So now let us talk about how to read current affairs or where to read current affairs from. Okay, so current affairs will require you to religiously follow one newspaper throughout the year, or at least throughout the journey you are going to be with the UPSC Civil Services. Okay, so you can be going with either of these two newspapers, either the Hindu or the Indian Express. The choice is yours. And again, if you are comfortable with hard copy, go for a hard copy newspaper. If you are comfortable with a soft copy, go for a digital copy. Okay, that's up to you. But go for one of these newspapers, and these have to be read religiously. Okay, just like you do not forget eating food throughout the day at least once, you should not be forgetting this. Okay, as long as it is not going to be a case where you are pretty ill, or for that matter you cannot avoid this. Okay, you are otherwise occupied with something else. Unless that is the case, you cannot have any excuse of not reading the newspaper. Okay, so that is the very first thing. This is the very first glimpse of what has happened in the past 24 hours when you were basically busy in your own day. Okay, so that is something that you need as the first or primary source of your information. So this is going to be the primary source of information. Okay, then apart from that, what we also need to do is basically read PIB releases. Now PIB basically is Press and Information Bureau. This is one of the departments of the Government of India under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Now basically when you talk about the PIB, so it is the official, you can say, public relation kind of body. So this is something which actually releases all the press release of the government with respect to all the departments of the government to the public. Okay, so any kind of scheme, any kind of parliamentary question, any kind of speech that is made by the Prime Minister, or for that matter the President or Vice President, that is something which actually is released via this particular portal. Okay, that portal is actually www.pib.gov.in. Okay, so this is basically the website which actually gets you can say refreshed almost every day after 9:30 p.m. You can actually go and have a glimpse of this. Okay, so what exactly is there to focus upon with respect to PIBs? One of the most important things, government schemes. Okay, now why I am saying for government schemes go for PIB and not the newspaper? Because when you go for the newspaper is definitely going to mention the features of this particular scheme, but it will also contain some kind of opinions as well. But when you go to PIB and read about a particular government scheme, you will only and only find the features. What exactly is the feature, what exactly is the financial outlay, which you can say ministry is going to lead it, and subsequently is it a centrally sponsored or central sector scheme. Okay, these are the things that actually come with respect to the government schemes, and one of the most important reasons to go for PIB is basically government schemes. The second one, parliamentary replies. Now, not a lot of people are going to advise you this, but I advise you that you read parliamentary replies. What exactly are parliamentary replies? So, whenever a particular session goes on in the parliament of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, so it is basically the parliamentarians who actually raise question in front of the government as to what are the actions taken to various, you can say, questions that they have. Okay, they may be asking about anything, the development with respect to the road infrastructure in the country, the health infrastructure in the country, the education setup in the country. They may be asking any kind of question that is needed to be answered by the government. So all those answers are actually first of all answered in the parliament, and then they are also released to the public via the parliamentary replies. Now, why are they important? Now, parliamentary replies actually cover the schemes in a very concise manner. Okay, so one particular department, what are the schemes related to, let us say, the development of women, or for that matter empowerment of women. Now the Minister for Women and Child Development is going to respond to this particular question with a list of all the schemes and the progress that is thus far made, and that is something which is going to be a part of parliamentary replies. So this is something which becomes a very invaluable source with respect to your you can say data augmentation. Now the third one is basically year end review. So year end reviews usually are released during the months of December and January, and they basically tell you the compilation of all the activities that go on within that particular department from January till at least November. Okay, so that is why this is something which gives you what are the major highlights of that particular ministry, and all the ministries release this. And with respect to the UPSC, we need to focus upon the Ministry of Finance. Okay, then we have the Ministry of Women and Child Development. We have Ministry of Family, Health and Welfare. Okay, we have Ministry of Farmers and Agriculture. Okay, then subsequently we have the Ministry of Social Justice. That is something which is very important. Okay, so there are few ministries with regards to which we need to cover the year end review, and not you can say word to word, but the major schemes, the major steps that they have introduced this particular year. Okay, so this is basically what we need to do with respect to PIB. So these are your important sources. Now comes the part of what are the additional concepts that you are going to get from Yojana or Kurukshetra. Now, with respect to Yojana or Kurukshetra, these are the detailed versions of these schemes. Okay, now with respect to the newspaper, these are the you can say the opinions of the journalists, opinions of the various columnists and scholars. This is basically going to be the one which would be the opinion of the government, or for that matter the you can say the various you can say civil servants as well. So that is what you are going to get here. So what is the government perspective about a particular scheme? What exactly are the objectives? How it is to be achieved? So this is basically a magazine which comes once in a month. So there are about 90 pages in this particular magazine. Okay, and in this particular magazine you may go for one article a day. That's it. If you want to, you can go for it. If you don't want to, that's fine, we'll cover it. Okay, so this is basically what are the actual sources of your knowledge that you are going to study. And if you are going to religiously study this, skim this. Okay, just skim over this, and you should be knowing what is the name of the scheme. Okay, The last one is basically explainer videos from Sunset TV. Now these are basically the videos that were actually shot sometime in the back, which basically tell you how exactly the government functions, what exactly are the various information, you can say dissemination videos that are actually there with respect to this YouTube channel of Sunset TV. Those are the ones which you may want to see in order to understand better. Okay, but again, this is optional. You need not devote your resources for this. Okay, now you would ask me what exactly is the time that is required to read the newspaper. So with respect to reading the newspaper, you should be going for 1 or 1.5 hours. Okay, so reading of the newspapers, that should take you about 60 minutes to 90 minutes. This is what you need to do. Okay, now about note making, I'll be talking about it. How exactly do you need to make the notes? But this is basically the maximum time that you should be dedicating, and eventually this is going to come up. This is not going to happen on the very first day. On the very first day, you may feel like that you would be requiring 2 or 2.5 hours for reading the newspaper, and that is fine. Okay, it is basically an iterative process. Gradually, it basically comes down to this time and sometimes even below this. Okay, and these are basically the things that we need to do. So this is 1, this is 2. Okay, now let us understand what exactly is the demand of UPSC with respect to current affairs. So we are going to see some of the previous year questions that have been asked right from 2011 till 2025, and we are going to understand what exactly has been the difference in the approach. Okay, and then we will be drawing our conclusions from that. So we'll be quickly glancing through the questions. Okay, we'll be quickly glancing through the questions here, and then subsequently we will be talking about the various you can say questions here. So in UPSC 2011, okay, this was one question. In the union budget of 2011 and 12, a full exemption from the basics customs duty was extended to the bio-based asphalt or bio-asphalt. Okay, what is the importance of this particular material? So in the 2011-12 union budget, there was a particular exemption that was given to a very you can say important material at that particular time, and it was called bio-asphalt. So now it is basically asking what exactly is this particular material. Okay, so what do you see? That it is basically a question which is based upon UPSC's union budget or the government's budget of a particular year, but it is more concerned about what exactly is the material all about. Okay, so this is basically the 4 statements that are there, and subsequently you have to choose the correct of these statements. Okay, so we are not going to solve this question. I am just going to tell you what exactly is the way in which questions are asked. So I will be reading the major question, and then subsequently I will be explaining the context, and then we will be moving ahead. So in this particular question, we can see that it is more focused upon what exactly is the material, nothing more than that. So there are certain features which have been given here, and you have to choose the right features out of them. Okay, so that is the first kind of question that was asked, UPSC 2011. Now again, UPSC 2011, there was another question, and it was related to something called the New START Treaty. Okay, that was in news that particular year. So New START Treaty, basically START Treaty was a bilateral treaty between Russia and the USA. Okay, so this particular treaty has been renewed on you can say a lot of instances, and that basically is one of the assurances between the two countries that they are not going to you can say develop very long range weapons with respect to each other. Okay, so this particular treaty has been renewed several times, and that was basically the you can say the inspiration behind this question. The New START Treaty was in news. Why? What is this treaty? So it is just asking you what exactly is this treaty, nothing else. Okay, so what exactly is that particular treaty? So if you remember this, that this is something which is about something which is weapons, and it involves USA and Russia. Okay, so you are not going to read into the other things. You are going to click the very first option, that is the option A. Okay, so this is UPSC 2011 again. Now in UPSC 2012, there was you can say there was a question related to rare earth metals. Recently, there has been a concern over the short supply over a group of elements called rare earth metals, and the question asks, why is this the reason? Okay, so what happened in 2012 was that China basically decided that it was going to restrict its rare earth elements exports. Okay, and rare earth elements are something which are indispensable for making a lot of high technology devices, and at the same time, even today they are one of the most important devices to make some of the most important technologies like wind turbines, okay, maglev. So these are basically the things which are actually made out of the rare earth elements. But the point is that because of a shift in China's policy regarding the export of these minerals, okay, this particular question is the one which was asked in the examination. And again, when you talk about it here, the question is about, you have to tell the reason why this has happened. Okay, so it basically first of all talks about China, that what exactly is China and how exactly is that has it imposed the restrictions over the export, and subsequently where exactly are these minerals found in the world. Okay, that is the second one, and then subsequently the third one is about how exactly these minerals are used. Okay, so that is basically how this particular question was asked. So this is something which is actually given directly in one particular newspaper. Okay, then UPSC 2014, if a wetland of international importance is brought under the Montreux record, what does it imply? Okay, so you basically are given 4 options. So you basically just need to know what exactly is this particular piece of document related to. Okay, so basically it is related to the Ramsar Convention on Conservation of Wetlands, and subsequently that particular year one of the wetlands from India was actually the one which was included in this particular record. So that is why this question was the one which got triggered. Okay, so that is UPSC 2014. So straightforward question on what exactly a particular thing is. Okay, now again UPSC 2014, there was a question on the BRICS. So basically this question was about when the BRICS was founded, how exactly the BRICS was, you can say what exactly is the fundamental declaration behind the BRICS, who are the members here, and subsequently that is what we had this particular question all about. Okay, so BRICS is basically a multilateral group of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Okay, so when that was formed, so this was basically the 5th year anniversary of that. So that is why this particular question was asked. Okay, so straight cut question on what exactly is BRICS and what exactly has been the you can say the way in which the members have joined. Okay, then we go to another question. Now this particular question keeps on repeating itself in a different fashion. Okay, this is a question which actually is categorized as places in news. Okay, now this particular question is the one you are going to find every single year, one such question, places in news. Now people actually are very interested in finding out you can say something called mapping for UPSC, mapping for current affairs. The point is they are just places in news. Okay, you need to understand that there must be something drastic which is going on in these places, and that is why they have attracted you can say sustained attention of the media, and subsequently they have been the one where some way the Indian diplomatic missions have been involved. Okay, so here you are basically given certain regions in the world, and with them they are given certain countries, and you have to check which of them have been correctly or incorrectly matched. So in this particular one we had to check which of them were correctly matched. Okay, so that is basically the next kind of question. Now this question is something which is asked even today. Okay, now this is 2015, directly from one of the schemes that was launched after the you can say the assuming of the office of the NDA government in 2014. Okay, so Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana has been launched for. So who exactly is the beneficiary of this particular scheme? The most fundamental, or you can say standout you can say aspect of this particular scheme, and that is how the question was framed. Okay, 2015. Okay, now the next one, 2015, again the Fortaleza declaration recently in the news is related to the affairs of. Okay, so there was a particular declaration called the Fortaleza declaration that actually was related to BRICS. Okay, and that is something why the question had come. Straightforward question. Okay, you need not be very you can say in depth of this particular topics. Then talking about the next one, the terms agreement on agriculture, agreement on application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, peace clause appear to be in the news in the context of the affairs of. Again, it is basically about which of these international bodies actually has got such agreements for themselves. Agreement on agriculture, agreement on application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and peace clause. Now see, this particular question is something which does the rounds every single year in one matter or the other. Okay, so this is related to the World Trade Organization and the tussle between India's minimum support price regime and the fair play policy of the WTO. So there are a lot of countries which actually say that India heavily subsidizes its agricultural produce and subsequently it actually is misutilizing the agreements under the WTO. So these are basically the agreements that we talk about. Okay, so when you read economy, this is something that you are going to talk about. Okay, so that is basically the answer here. So not a very tough question to answer. Then UPSC 2016. So this was basically the time when Payments Bank were the ones which were launched for the first time. You might be remembering Airtel Payments Bank coming up, Paytm Payments Bank coming up. So this particular question was inspired by that. Establishment of Payments Bank is allowed in India to promote financial inclusion. Now this is basically a topic that is very, very important with respect to UPSC. That is financial inclusion. How can we extend the services of banking as well as insurance and finance related services to the underserved or the people who do not have access to it yet. Okay, just like the people in the rural areas, the people with humbler financial backgrounds, how are we going to include them in this? So Jan Dhan Yojana was also one of the ways of improving financial inclusion in the country. Okay, now this basically was the question related to Payments Bank. Again, there were three different you can say features given related to the Payments Bank, and we needed to choose what exactly was the correct answer. Okay, so this was the Payments Bank. Now 2016, again there was a question on Li-Fi. So when we talk about science and technology, you are going to see a lot of questions. They basically come from you can say current affairs or current affairs triggered events. Okay, so with reference to Li-Fi recently in the news, which of the following statements is or are correct? So we basically needed to understand what exactly are the you can say what exactly are the reasons, what exactly are the statements behind this. Okay, so that's the one. Then talking about the next one, 2016, intended nationally determined contributions is sometimes seen in the news in the context of. So in 2015, there was something which was a very famous agreement that was called the Paris Agreement or Paris Climate Agreement. Okay, so this was something which actually was the way in which all the countries in the world, developed as well as developing countries in the world, they came to an agreement that how exactly are we going to you can say tackle the menace of climate change so that we can collectively defend ourselves from the adversities that are going to come in the future. Okay, so based upon that, there was something called the intended nationally determined contributions. Okay, now this is something which was asked in 2016 based upon the outcomes of Paris Agreement 2015. Okay, so this is basically what was needed to be answered. Straight cut question. Okay, now UPSC 2017. Okay, now you see a slight change in the kind of questions that are asked. Recognition of prior learning scheme. Recognition of prior learning scheme is sometimes mentioned in the news with reference to. Now basically you are actually given a particular scheme that is actually called Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Okay, so there is something called the Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and this particular you can say scheme is basically about skilling and reskilling the people on vocational aspects or vocational training. Okay, so prior learning scheme is basically a part of this. Okay, that is called the Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So now a part of the scheme is basically given as the question, and you need to identify what exactly is this particular you can say question all about. What exactly is the reference to this particular part of scheme? Okay, so what we have seen that till now we see that we were trying to identify the beneficiaries of a particular scheme. Now we are moving towards a part of the scheme, and with respect to this part of the scheme, which scheme does it belong to? Okay, so that is something which has been the case. Now UPSC 2017 again. Now this particular question was directly coming from Smart India Hackathon. Which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the Smart India Hackathon 2017? Again, a government event that happened. Okay, and this was something which was actually you can say the one which was very widely covered in the news as well as with respect to the PIB. So that is something that we needed to understand here. Okay, so this is basically that question. Now 2018. with reference to India's decision to levy an equalization tax of 6% on online advertisement services offered by non-resident entities, which of the following statements is or are correct? Now, this particular question is based upon the Union Budget announcement of 2018. So, in 2018, there were certain reforms that were made in the taxation structure so that there could be a fair ground that could be created with respect to the entities who are you can say functioning within the country and the ones which are non-residential entities. So this equalization tax was basically one of the ways in which the costs of the domestic producers and the non-residential entities were the ones which were to be equalized. So, excuse me, that is basically the question here. Again, UPSC 2018, a direct question. The term two-state solution is sometimes mentioned in the news in the context of the affairs of. Now, this particular question has got a lot of repetition with respect to UPSC as well. Two-state solution has been in the news again because of the you can say confrontation which is going on between Israel and the Palestinian regions. Okay, the Gaza Strip and the you can say West Bank. So these are basically currently under the occupation of the Palestinians, while Israel is basically the one which is in military confrontation on the Gaza Strip. So this two-state solution is still doing the rounds. Okay, and it is related to the affairs of Israel. Okay, so that is basically the question which was asked in UPSC 2018. So what do you see here is basically that there is now a blend of questions, some of them being direct and some of them actually trying to take you to the lower depths of this particular news affair. This is basically one of the questions that actually came from the Unified Payment Interface or the UPI that we know. Okay, with reference to digital payments, consider the following. So this basically is about the Bheem app. Okay, the UPI app Bheem. So it is basically about the Bheem app which allows the user to transfer money to anyone with a UPI enabled bank account. So we basically needed to choose the correct answer here. So again, this was related to digital payments and its revolution that was actually coming up. So Bheem in 2018 was an emerging technology. Gradually we came up with something called wallets of the Paytm wallet, and then now you can say QR codes and UPI is something which is you can say a very commonly used technology. Okay, now in 2018 another very important event happened in the country, and that was basically the presidential elections. Okay, so presidential elections basically happened, and based upon the presidential elections, this was the question that came up. Okay, with reference to the election of the president, consider the following statements. Now, this particular question seems to be purely coming from Polity, but that has been triggered due to current affairs. And again, what exactly is the question talking about? The mechanism of the election of the president of India. Okay, so that is basically the one which has been talked about here. So when we read about Polity, this is something which becomes very clear, but you will see exactly the same question 5 years later. Okay, but you are going to see the change in the you can say the level of the question. Now, again in UPSC 2018 there was another question which was about you can say the atomic power of India. Okay, so in the Indian context, what is the implication of ratifying the additional protocol with the International Atomic Energy Agency? So International Atomic Energy Agency is the global watchdog which basically is responsible for ensuring that none of the countries are actually stockpiling upon weapons grade you can say weapons grade uranium or plutonium for making weapons of mass destruction. So that is in a way saying that it basically checks if any country is actually making any kind of nuclear bombs without any you can say without any oversight. Okay, so they basically had released an additional protocol which India had ratified. So what would be the implication of this particular ratification? That was the question here. Okay, now 2018 again there was a question on what exactly are the objectives of Digital India mission. Okay, so what exactly are the objectives here, and we had to you can say identify the correct statements with respect to this particular question. UPSC 2020. Now see, now we are into Digital India, now we are into digital payments. Now see the kind of question that comes from Digital India again. Consider the following statements. Aadhaar metadata cannot be stored for more than 3 months. State cannot enter into any contract with private corporations for sharing of Aadhaar data. Aadhaar is mandatory for for obtaining insurance products, and Aadhaar is mandatory for getting benefits funded out of the Consolidated Fund of India. Now this was an atypical question. Okay, this particular question is the one which most of the people have got no idea about, and the reason being that this was a very detailed question with respect to Aadhaar. Okay, so you can expect such questions as well. So not all the questions in UPSC are solvable. This was one of them. Okay, although current affairs triggered, you might be knowing a few things about it, but you will not be able to pick all the right choices here. Okay, so deliberately I have even included those questions. Again, UPSC 2020, with the present state of development, artificial intelligence can effectively do which of the following? So we needed to check which of the following could be done with respect to the artificial intelligence that was there in 2020. Okay, so this was basically the time when we were reeling under the COVID-19 lockdown. At that particular time, artificial intelligence was basically one of the most important technologies for making vaccines for you can say COVID-19. So a lot of research was basically done with respect to various you can say artificial intelligence tools in order to identify the weak areas or the vulnerable areas of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that is the COVID-19 virus. Okay, so that is basically the concept here, very extensively covered in the year 2020. Again, in 2020 there was another thing. During the lockdown time, there was a just before the lockdown time, there was a very strong market of something called Bitcoin. Okay, now Bitcoin is basically one of the cryptocurrencies based upon blockchain technology. So instead of going for Bitcoin, the UPSC talked about the blockchain technology. So this is exactly how we started decoding that, okay, it's not just about the product, it's also about the technology which is powering the product and what exactly could be the other applications of this. And that is exactly what the questions is all about. Okay, so this question is directly from blockchain technology and its application. Okay, then came the concept of, you can say, the color grading of carbon, that how exactly you can say the various kinds of carbon are color graded. The similar also happened with respect to hydrogen. You might be knowing about blue hydrogen, you might be knowing about green hydrogen, you might be knowing about gray hydrogen. Okay, so these are basically the ways in which the you can say the various elements have been color coded with respect to their you can say various characteristics. So this is basically the question from 2021. What is blue carbon? Okay, now UPSC 2022, rapid financing instruments and rapid credit facility are related to the provisions of the lending by which one of the following institutions? Okay, now the point is that this particular question is based upon the economic crisis which Sri Lanka was facing at this particular time. So by the end of 2021, we found Sri Lanka actually reaching a brink of default of all its foreign you can say currency obligations. That is basically its imports were way greater than its exports, and subsequently did not have sufficient foreign money to give to you can say to pay for its bills, and subsequently a lot of things actually stopped in Sri Lanka, including fuel. Okay, examinations, because there was no paper that was present, that was also imported from India, and subsequently Sri Lanka had to actually seek its help from International Monetary Fund. So International Monetary Fund actually has got these facilities for bailing out those countries which are actually under severe economic distress. Okay, so this question was directly from that. But again, how exactly do you get to this? When you understand how exactly Sri Lanka is trying to come out of the economic crisis. Okay, so when you read that particular news, you basically find this particular term. Okay, now UPSC 2022, with reference to Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission ABDM, consider the following statements. Again, with respect to ABDM, we basically had certain statements and we needed to understand what exactly is the mission, who exactly is going to implement it mandatorily, who exactly is it going to you can say take it as optional, and subsequently what exactly is its objective with respect to the citizens. Okay, so this is basically how you see that now it's not just about the objective or the beneficiary, it is also about who is going to implement it and who is not going to implement it. Okay, so this is something which is actually related to the health of the public. Okay, now again in UPSC 2022, this was purely a question on geography. Consider the following questions. There were 5 countries given and we needed to tell how many of them shared a border with Afghanistan. Now people say that we don't really understand how exactly these questions come up, but if you look at this particular event closely, in 2022, when we were celebrating our Independence Day, the democratically elected government in Afghanistan was overthrown by Taliban, and Taliban established its own reign after that. Okay, So that event actually triggered this particular question. Similarly, a similar kind of question also was triggered when the Russia-Ukraine military conflict started at this particular time. So this particular year, 2022, there were 2 questions of that type. Okay, so this is how you see how exactly current affairs comes up. Again, in 2022, the third type of, you can say a third kind of technology which was doing rounds was Web 3.0. Okay, that what exactly is Web 3.0 and how exactly is it different from the current way in which we use the World Wide Web or the internet. Okay, so this question was about that. Now, in 2023, the question invasive species is specialist group that develops global invasive species database belongs to which of the following organizations. So we now are focusing not just upon an international organization but also another specialist team of this particular you can say organization. Okay, and that comes out with a you can say a global database as well. So that is how you basically see the questions have changed in UPSC 2023. UPSC 2023 was seen to be one of the toughest paper in the you can say in the recent years of UPSC. Why? Because of such questions. I'll be showing you the next question as well. Okay, now this was basically the bouncer that came up with respect to the UPSC. Okay, why? Because people were not prepared for such questions. Now the question says, consider the following statements. There are 2 statements. The first one says, in the post-pandemic recent past, many central banks worldwide had carried out interest rate hikes. Okay. Statement 2, central bank generally assumes, the banks generally assume that they have the ability to counteract the rising consumer prices via monetary policy means. Okay, now this particular question is not just related to any event of 2023, but this is basically a question that is a culmination of all the central banking activities that happened between 2020 and 2023. Okay, now when you talk about the interest rates, so these interest rates are basically talking about the repo rate that you talk with respect to RBI. Okay, and these interest rates are going to be the one which are going to determine what kind of you can say lending and borrowing activities and how exactly the economy of a particular country is going to be you can say affected by this. Okay, so this kind of question, first of all having 2 such statements. Now what is difficult is that we have to first of all evaluate their correctness, and after evaluating the correctness we have to see if they both are correct, does the second statement correctly explain the first statement. The second thing that we have to do, if both of them are incorrect, so which one is incorrect? Or if they both are correct and the second statement is not the correct explanation, we have to identify that. This is something which became difficult. And why did it become difficult? This became difficult just because of the fact that people were not ready to understand this question. So this question is no more about you know this or not. It is about if you know this, how much you know, and why exactly is a particular thing happening. So now you also have to dive into the reasons of this. Okay, so till this particular point what happened was that you might be reading a compilation of current affairs and you might be finding that okay, this is good enough for me to attempt the paper. Okay, but since 2023 it's not just enough to read the compilations, it's also of great importance that you understand what exactly is the you can say the kind of news that we are covering here. Okay, that's the first kind of example. Now the second one, I told you what exactly happened in 2018 presidential elections. 2023 presidential elections, again we get the first you can say women prime minister coming from the scheduled tribe community, Honorable President Draupadi Murmu ji. So this question is basically on that. Okay, now the same question on election of president has now got a whole different dimension. Okay, it's no more just about the vote of the value of the vote of the MLAs. It's also about the members nominated to either house of the parliament or legislative assemblies are eligible to vote for a presidential election. So they are a part of the electoral college. Okay, then higher the number of elective seats, higher is the vote value. No more just about what is the vote value of each state, what exactly is the effect. Now you are talking about the formulae. Okay, this is basically a formula. How exactly are you going to calculate the vote value of MLA? Because all the states have got different vote values. Next one, another difficult question. The value of vote of each MLA of Madhya Pradesh is greater than that of Kerala. Now this is something that none of us read. Okay, unless you are very interested or you may have glanced through it, none of us are going to read this. And this came up in the paper. Okay, and the fourth one, the value of vote of each MLA of Puducherry is higher than that of Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, so this is basically how you see the question has changed, the same question on election to the President of India. So that is why it basically is now required that you do not just rely on anything else, okay, but your own reading. Now, UPSC 2025. So now this question is basically about the membership of NATO, because a lot of reorientation, a lot of you can say countries have actually sought the membership of you can say NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, since the you can say the military conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Okay, so these are the countries that have been given, and we have been asked to identify those countries which are a part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO. Okay, this is basically a question from UPSC 2025, and this is purely based upon the Russia-Ukraine conflict that is going on. Okay, again UPSC 2025, a question comes up from agricultural production, okay, for the year 2022-2023. So this is basically the question. Consider the following statements about turmeric during the year 2022-2023. Now this particular question comes straight from economic survey. Okay, now economic survey is basically one of the documents that is released by the government of India every single year, which evaluates the economic performance of the government and its departments in the past year. Okay, so there is a chapter on agriculture, and there we find this particular data. Okay, so that is basically the question here. Then UPSC 2025, another question that comes up from one of the schemes. This time it is Rashtriya Gokul Mission. But now what has happened in this particular question, we see it is important for the upliftment of rural poor, as majority of low producing indigenous animals are with small and marginal farmers and landless laborers. Now you have moved beyond objectives. Now you are also talking about the implications. Okay, so that is why it is very, very important for us to understand no more just beneficiaries, aims and objectives, but also the implications. Who exactly is going to be impacted, and if they are, what exactly is the reason they are going to be impacted because of the kind of question that has been asked. Okay, so this is basically how the current affairs has evolved over time with respect to UPSC. Okay, again UPSC 2025, one of the most you can say unexpected kind of question that came up. Okay, now till now you have seen two statement type of questions. Now this is three statements. Okay, at the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference COP28, India refrained from signing the Declaration on Climate and Health. So this is something that India did. Okay, now there are two reasons. There have been two more statements that have been given, that what exactly is the content of this particular declaration and why did India not sign it. Now what you have to do is you have to first of all analyze if both of them are correct, and if they are, is the third statement the correct reason for the first statement. So they should be telling us that the first statement, both of them are the correct explanation for first, or one of them is correct explanation for first, or none of them are correct explanation for first, or they are incorrect factually. So now international affairs, but again outcomes. Okay, this is basically outcome of a particular convention of party. It was not something which was actually you can say any kind of organization. Now this was basically an outcome. Again, this is something which has got changed. Okay, so again this is not something that you are going to find in any kind of you can say current affairs compilation. Unless you read that in the newspaper or you read the entire text, you are not going to understand it. Okay, no one is going to give you this ki why exactly India did this. Similarly, another question of this kind came up from Paris Agreement. Now this was basically based upon the carbon markets. Okay, that what exactly are going to be the principles of carbon markets, that was basically the question here. Again, this is something which you would require reading of the paper. Okay, without the context such questions cannot be answered, plain and simple. Okay, so this is how we see the UPSC has changed its approach with respect to current affairs question. Now this is a question again coming from you can say science and technology. This was about quantum computing. Okay, that there was a particular chip that was released that was called Majorana 1. Okay, now this particular chip is basically the first quantum enabled chip, again something which is distinct, the first ever made for a new emerging technology. Okay, now the question was who developed it and what exactly is the you can say one of the aspects of this. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning. So this is basically the question that was asked. So what do we understand from this? Something which is pretty unique and something which is going to have global proportions of impact. Okay, quantum computing is something which is going to change diametrically the way that we talk about computing, the way we talk about cryptography, and one such chip was actually developed in reality. So definitely it demands attention. Okay, so that's the question here. Apart from that, these are some of the questions that came up with respect to 2025 mains examination from various papers. The first question that you have, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's writing and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. Now this question comes from the first paper, GS1. And do you know the reason? This particular year, a movie was released, okay, on the life and times of Mahatma Phule. So this particular question is inspired by that. The second one, discuss the nature of Jammu Kashmir Legislative Assembly after the Jammu Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019. Briefly describe the powers and functions of the Assembly of the Union Territory of Jammu Kashmir. Now this particular question is based upon the elections that took place, okay, with respect to the Jammu Kashmir Legislative Assembly. So Jammu Kashmir was basically, you can say, the special status of the Jammu Kashmir that was accorded to it by the Article 370 and Article 35A, that was repealed from the constitution, and subsequently it was replaced by the Jammu Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019. So based upon this, what happened was that now the state of Jammu Kashmir was bifurcated into Union Territory of Ladakh and Union Territory of Jammu Kashmir, with Jammu Kashmir Union Territory given a legislature. Okay, so the first elections took place here. So this question was inspired by that. You cannot be finding this just like that. Okay, so you have to read it. Now, going beyond that, the reform process in the United Nations remains unresolved because of the delicate imbalance of East and West and entanglement of the USA with Russo-Chinese alliance. Examine and critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontation in this regard. And this is basically the question, or this is another question, very sorry, there was an error. So this question is coming from GS2. This is something which is called as international relations, the question on United Nations. So there is basically, you see that both the sides, when you talk about Russia and when you talk about USA, they basically have opposing stance on everything, almost everything. Okay, USA is something which considers Iran bad. Russia and China, both of them support Iran. Okay, USA is something which supports Israel, but Russia and China, both of them are accusing Israel of war crimes. Okay, so in this regard, what has happened is that the United Nations Security Council, as well as most of the United Nations, has got paralyzed while functioning as a multilateral body. And that is something which has gone out of proportion with respect to Israel-Palestine situation. So this question is inspired from that. Okay, then what are the challenges faced by the semiconductor industry in India? Mention the salient features of the Indian semiconductor mission. Okay, so this particular part, India aims to become a semiconductor manufacturing hub, is a part of this. Now this question is from GS3. Okay, this question comes from GS3. So you can yourself see that all the you can say papers have got some element of current affairs that is asked or inspired from them. Okay, so this is basically the way in which questions have been asked. Now what do we draw as conclusions from the previous year questions? So there are certain conclusions that are very, very important for us to understand. The first thing, UPSC does not focus on trivial facts. Okay, it does not focus on trivial facts. Now this is what we actually called as who's who. You are not seeing any question which asks who is the Prime Minister of a certain country, who is the Secretary General of United Nations, who exactly became such a particular person or got appointed to this particular position. It does not ask that. Okay, so this is something which you are not going to lay a lot of emphasis upon. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to understand here. The second thing that we need to understand here is that we are going to focus on topics. Focus on topics with implications over nation or world. Okay, that's the second thing that we need to understand. So we need not go for all the topics that come into the newspaper. So that is why the newspaper has to be very selectively read. Okay, the third thing that we get from it, analyzing the reasons for a particular decision or particular happening. Okay, this is something which is going to help you with respect to your assertion reasoning type of questions. And where exactly are you going to get this? Either in the article or in an editorial. So that is why editorial reading is also important. Okay, so the fourth thing that we need to go, apart from these things, what we also need to understand is some prolonged conflicts and regions involved. You will find a question always from this. Okay, so these are some of the things that we need to be very carefully preparing. Okay, with respect to PIB, you are going to cover the schemes. You have seen that the schemes basically have evolved over a time. Okay, once it was what exactly is the beneficiary, then who exactly is the what exactly are the objectives, and then subsequently we have also seen what are the implications of the scheme. Okay, so that is how we basically draw these conclusions with respect to the PYQs. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Now, talking about how exactly to cover current affairs. Okay, so first of all, we need to understand while reading the questions that with respect to UPSC, we need not just remember the fact. We need to remember the features of that particular article, the most important ideas that are communicated to us. Okay, why? Because the approach for reading an article with respect to UPSC is going to be statement based. Okay, that basically means that when you're reading a particular article, you should be trying to understand what could be the statement based question that I could make from this. And that is basically going to make you understand how to read a particular article. The second thing, you need to read the daily newspaper. You cannot skip this. If you are skipping this based upon the concept that I will be reading a magazine later on in order to augment my knowledge, you must be getting knowledge but not the context. And that is what is going to be the difference with respect to the assertion reasoning questions. Plain and simple. Okay, you may be writing your mains answer to some extent, but you will not be able to answer the prelims question, and you will not be going to the mains as long as you do not remember your prelims. Okay, then not all the entries are important, especially the ones which are politicized are not to be touched. Okay, only the fundamental part of it needs to be understood. We need not talk about who exactly is accusing enforcement directorate of something, or for that matter what exactly is the controversy that election commission is embroiled into, or things like that. We are not supposed to be talking about it. Okay, we are only going to talk about the constitutional provisions, the legal provisions which are related to these bodies. Okay, so that is something that we need to understand. No state specific news. Now, how to make these notes? So first of all, my suggestion to all of you would be that either you make these notes digitally. Okay, that is, you could be using a laptop or a computer to make your notes with respect to Google Docs or something like that. If you have a tab, you could be using a note making app. Okay, if you do not have both of them, you should be using loose paper sheets. Okay, why? Because if you use loose paper sheets, what happens is that you can add more amount of news into that after a new recent happening has happened. So after you keep on reading newspapers, let us say for 2 or 3 months continuously, what happens is that you get to know that news becomes repetitive. Okay, why? Because current affairs are a development of what already has happened in the past. So that is why you are not going to repeat all the news again. So initial 2-3 months is basically the struggle. After that, it basically becomes repetitive. So you are only going to add on the you can say the recent happenings to that, and that's it. Nothing more than that. Okay, so that is why use either loose sheets or make them digitally. Now the next thing, what do you need to write down? You need to note down only the most important messages of that particular you can say article. You need not go with the quotes that are given there. You need not go about the very small facts that are given there. You only need to know, okay, this is the scheme, this is who are going to be affected by it, this is run by this particular department, that's it. All of it. Okay, then any keyword or concept that is there, just like we talked about a particular question that was on interest rates, okay, central banks, inflation. So these are basically the things that you would be requiring to expand upon. And Also, those topics that you do not know, while you're reading the newspaper, you came across blockchain technology, you do not know about it, write it down. What exactly is blockchain technology? What exactly are the applications? Are there any current applications with respect to the government? Okay, that is something that you need to write down. Okay, so that is basically how you make your notes. Now I'm going to give you a very quick example of this. Okay, so right now what the situation is that our incumbent vice president has resigned. So honorable vice president, former honorable vice president Jagdeep Dhankar has resigned, and right now there is going to be an election to the office of vice president. Okay, so election to the office of vice president of India. So this is something which is right now in the news. Okay, so with respect to this particular concept, what exactly am I going to write down? First of all, constitutional provisions. Okay, so constitutional provisions about the vice president. So here I will be talking about who exactly, you can say what are the constitutional provisions, and subsequently here you will be talking about eligibility, elections, okay, then resigning or removal. You will be talking about salary. Okay, so this is basically what you are going to talk about with respect to this. Now, in elections, you are going to talk about the role of election commission. Okay, you are also going to talk about the type of election. You are then going to talk about the function of the Vice President of India. Okay, then at the same time you are going to compare it with the US Vice President as well as. Okay, how exactly is it different or similar to the US Vice President? Okay, then at the same time you will be talking about the emoluments and perks that you have with respect to the Vice President of India's office. That's it, nothing more than that. So this is exactly how you are going to talk about this particular thing. You need not know, need to know who exactly are the candidates from both the sides. You would be needing only the elect of this particular office. Who exactly gets elected is the one who is going to be, you can say, important with respect to your current affairs coverage. Apart from that, nothing else. This is what is required. Okay, what kind of election, what kind of electoral college, that is something that you are going to have with respect to this particular election. Okay, so that is an example for you. How exactly do you need to cover this? Apart from this, when we will be covering it, we will be talking in detail about what should be done. Now, it's not just important that you take the notes, or for that matter you read the newspaper. It is also very important that you revise them. So revision should be scheduled every weekend and then subsequently every month. Okay, now eventually what is going to happen, once the news starts repeating, this revision time gets shorter and shorter. Initially you will find that the revision time is very large, and then gradually it will become shorter and shorter. But at the same time, what is also going to happen, because you are going to integrate your static notes here, that is basically the concepts that you have learned in the textbooks, you are going to integrate it here with respect to the recent happenings. It is going to be an integrated revision for you. So this is going to be very significantly adding value to your UPSC journey. Now there is a magazine that actually comes with respect to this, and that is released by the Indian Express. That is called the UPSC Essentials magazine. Now this is one such magazine that I would recommend you. If you at all want to go with the magazines, this is the magazine that I would recommend for you. Okay. Apart from reading the newspaper, read this. This is more than enough. You need not go for any other compilation that comes out. Okay. And then subsequently, I will always say that you come and join our course. Why? Because when you join our course, we are the ones who are going to take care of all the kinds of background that you need to know about it. We are going to make you understand what exactly is the kind of, you can say, news article that you're talking about. How exactly are you going to deal the current affairs with respect to your overall preparation and integrate it with it. Okay. So that is what we are going to do here. So that is what is the concept. And towards the end, I would like to tell you that when you have this current affairs with you, okay, when you're updated with the current affairs, you are someone who becomes a person who is aware of the developments around the world. It makes your arguments better. It makes you street smart. Okay. So that is how you basically can participate in certain discussions that you might not be feeling very comfortable in the beginning. Okay. Then at the same time, I would give you a two-pronged approach. Okay. So this is more like a cooperation between you and me, that on your end, you basically read the newspaper. It is not important for you that you are going to understand everything. It is normal. If you do not understand everything, that is completely fine. Okay. As us, as Mentora, we are going to ensure that you are going to understand all the news articles that you read. Okay, the ones which are very, very important with respect to UPSC, we are the ones who are going to do it for you, that okay, this is what is to be read, how is that to be read, and subsequently what needs to be done more. Okay, so in that way, what is going to happen, you are not only going to brainstorm with us, but you are also going to improve your own, you can say, recapitulation. Okay, and subsequently, this is something which is going to be one of the best ways for you to revise your static notes as well, because when you integrate both of them together, you read them at one particular place. There is not a lot of things that you have to go back with respect to static in order to do it all over again. Okay, so I hope this video, although a little bit long, but have actually helped you understand what exactly are the nuances with respect to the current affairs. Okay, so current affairs is not something which is insurmountable. This is something which is actually very, very enjoyable, but only when you have the right perspective. And to set the perspective right, I would again and again emphasize, read the newspaper. Your job is to read the newspaper. Our job is to explain it to you. Okay. So I hope that this is something which becomes a collaboration between the two of us, and based upon that, we will be moving forward. So see you next time. Thank you.